Sometimes the people who claim to know you best are the ones who understand you least. Sometimes the family that's supposed to lift you up becomes the weight that pulls you down. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by your own team, dismissed by people who should have believed in you, or told you weren't good enough by the very people who were supposed to support you through everything. My name is Marena Castillo. I am 32 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon, where the rain falls as steadily as the doubts that used to plague my every waking moment. But that was before I learned that sometimes the most devastating betrayals come wrapped in team colors, and the most beautiful victories taste like the tears of those who never saw you coming. I should probably start by telling you about the Riverside Ravens, the semi-professional women's soccer team that I called home for 3 years. 3 years of practices in the rain, of bruised shins and grass stains, of believing that these women were my sisters, my chosen family. 3 years of thinking that loyalty meant something, that the bonds forged through shared exhaustion and mutual dreams were unbreakable. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. The Ravens weren't just a team. They were Portland's darlings, the scrappy underdogs who'd clawed their way up from recreational league to semi-pro status. We played in front of crowds that sometimes reached 500 people, which might not sound like much, but when you're used to playing in front of your boyfriend and maybe 3 other people, 500 feels like Wembley Stadium. I'd been with the Ravens since almost the beginning, not quite a founding member, but close enough that I remembered when our jerseys were hand-me-downs from the local high school, and our cleats came from whatever we could afford on our retail salaries. Back then, everyone was hungry. Everyone was grateful just to be there. But success changes people. It changes teams. And by my 3rd year, when sponsorship deals started rolling in and local news stations began showing up to our games, the Ravens had developed something they never had before. Standards. High standards, unforgiving standards, standards that, apparently, I no longer met. The first hint came during a Tuesday practice in late September. I'd been dealing with a minor ankle injury, nothing serious. Just a tweak that made me favor my left foot slightly. Coach Martinez had me running passing drills with the 2nd string, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the way my teammates were looking at me. You know that look, the one that says they've been talking about you when you're not around, the one that makes your stomach drop, even though you can't pinpoint exactly what's wrong. It's the look that precedes every betrayal, every dismissal, every moment when you realize that the ground you thought was solid beneath your feet has been shifting all along. Marena, Coach Martinez called after practice. Can we talk? I toweled off my face and walked over, my cleats squelching in the mud. Coach Martinez was a good woman, former professional player herself, someone who understood the game from the inside out. She'd always been straight with me, which is why the careful way she was choosing her words immediately set off alarm bells. How's the ankle feeling? Better, I said, which was true. Should be completely fine by this weekend. She nodded. But there was something in her expression that made me think my ankle wasn't really what this conversation was about. Listen, I've been thinking about our lineup for the championship game against the Cascade Wolves. My heart started beating faster. The championship game. The one we'd been working toward all season. The one that would determine whether we'd move up to the next tier of competition or stay where we were for another year. And thinking of making some changes, she continued. Trying some new formations. Maybe giving some of the younger players more field time. Younger players, the words hit me like a slap. I was 32, which in soccer terms was basically ancient. But I'd never felt old on the field. My body was still strong, my mind still sharp. I knew the game better than players half my age. Could read the field like a book written in a language I've been speaking my whole life. Coach, if this is about my speed, It's not about your speed, Marena. But the way she said it, the quickness of her denial, told me that it was absolutely about my speed. It's about what's best for the team. What's best for the team? The phrase that's been used to justify every betrayal in sports history. The phrase that makes the knife twist just a little deeper, because it wraps selfishness in the language of sacrifice. I nodded, because what else could I do? You don't argue with your coach 2 days before the biggest game of the season. You don't create drama when your team is on the verge of something historic. You swallow your pride and your hurt and your confusion, and you trust that the people who claim to know what's best for you actually have your best interests at heart. I should have known better. The championship game was on a Saturday in early October, one of those perfect autumn days when the air is crisp and the leaves are just starting to turn. Perfect weather for soccer, perfect weather for dreams to come true or be crushed under the weight of reality. I arrived at the field early, like always. I'd been doing the same pre-game routine for 3 years. Stretch, warm up, visualize the game ahead. I'd picture myself making that crucial pass, scoring that important goal, being the player my team needed when it mattered most. But when Coach Martinez posted the starting lineup, my name wasn't on it. I stared at the piece of paper taped to the locker room wall, reading it over and over again, thinking maybe I'd missed something, maybe there was a mistake. Maybe this was some kind of test, a way to motivate me to prove myself worthy of the starting position I'd held for 2 solid years. Marena? I turned around to find Cassie Werner, one of the newer players, standing behind me with a look of genuine sympathy on her face. Cassie was 24, fresh out of college, with the kind of natural athleticism that made everything look effortless. She was also one of the few people on the team who'd never made me feel like I was taking up space that belonged to someone younger. Faster, better. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I know this sucks. The thing about pity is that it's almost worse than hostility. Hostility you can fight against. Pity just sits there, confirming all your worst fears about yourself. It tells you that everyone else can see what you've been trying to deny, that you're not good enough anymore, that your time has passed, that you're just taking up space. It's fine, I said, because that's what you say when nothing is fine, but admitting it would make everything worse. Is it, though? Cassie asked. Because if I were you, I'd be pretty pissed off right now. I looked at her, this young woman who barely knew me, who had no reason to care about my feelings or my dignity. Why? Because you're our best midfielder, she said simply. And everyone knows it. The game started at 2 o'clock. I sat on the bench, watching my teammates warm up, watching the Cascade Wolves prepare for battle, watching 500 people fill the stands to witness what should have been my moment of glory. The first half was brutal. The Wolves were good, better than we'd expected. They were physical, aggressive, and they'd clearly done their homework. On our usual strategies, by halftime, we were down 2-0, and I could see the panic starting to creep into my teammates' faces. Coach Martinez paced the sideline during the break, shouting instructions and encouragement. She made a few substitutions, bringing in fresh legs and new energy. But she didn't look at me. Not once. The second half was even worse. The Wolves scored again in the 63rd minute, and suddenly we were facing not just defeat, but humiliation. The crowd was getting restless. Some of our supporters were already heading for the exits. That's when I heard it. Put Marena in. I looked up into the stands, trying to find the source of the voice. It was a woman I didn't recognize, maybe 50 years old, wearing a Ravens jersey and holding a sign with my name on it. Put Marena in. She called again, and this time a few other voices joined her. We want Marena. The chanting started small, just a handful of voices scattered throughout the crowd. But it grew, it spread. Within minutes, Half the stadium was calling my name, demanding that Coach Martinez put me in the game. I felt my face burning with a mixture of embarrassment and hope. This was not how I'd imagined this moment. This was not the way I'd wanted to prove my worth through fan pressure and public humiliation of my coach. But as the chanting continued, as the crowd made it clear that they believed in me, even when my own team didn't, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, the betrayal still fresh, but underneath it was something else. Something harder and more determined. With 15 minutes left in the game, Coach Martinez finally turned to me. "Marena," she called, "you're in." I ran onto the field to a roar from the crowd that made my chest tight with emotion. 3 years of loyalty, 3 years of giving everything I had to this team. And it had taken 500 strangers to remind everyone of what I could do. The game was essentially over. We were down 3-0 with 15 minutes to play against a team that had dominated us for 75 minutes. But sometimes, 15 minutes is enough to change everything. I touched the ball for the first time in the 78th minute. A simple pass from our left back. Nothing fancy, nothing spectacular. Just a woman who'd been told she was too slow, proving that sometimes speed isn't about how fast you can run. It's about how quickly you can think. I saw the opening before anyone else did. The Wolves defender was leaning too far forward, anticipating a pass that never came. Instead, I slipped the ball through his legs and found myself with a clear path to goal. The keeper came out to challenge me, but I'd been in this situation 1,000 times before. In practices, in games, in the countless hours I'd spent visualizing exactly this moment. Not the circumstances, maybe, but the opportunity to prove that I belonged here, that I was still the player I'd always been. I scored. The crowd exploded. My teammates mobbed me, suddenly remembering that I was one of them, suddenly acting like they'd believed in me all along. But I knew better. I knew that 15 minutes of redemption couldn't erase 3 years of being taken for granted. We didn't win the game. We lost 3-1, and our championship dreams died on that field. But as I walked off the pitch, as I listened to the crowd chanting my name one more time, I realized something important. I was done being grateful for scraps. I was done accepting that what was best for the team was best for me. I was done being a Riverside Raven. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word had gotten out about my performance, about the crowd's reaction, about the way I'd been benched despite being one of the team's most consistent players. Local sports bloggers were calling it a disgrace. The Portland Tribune ran a story with the headline, "Ravens bench their best player. Lose championship." My phone buzzed with a text from Coach Martinez. "We need to talk." I deleted it without responding. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I started looking at other teams, not just in Portland, but in Seattle, in Vancouver, in cities where I could start fresh and prove that my best days weren't behind me. That's when I found the Seattle Storm. The Storm were everything the Ravens weren't. They were professional, not semi-professional. They had real sponsorship deals, real facilities, real paychecks. They were also the Ravens' biggest rivals, the team that had consistently outperformed us in every head-to-head matchup for the past 2 years. Their coach, Elena Vasquez, had a reputation for being tough but fair. She'd played professionally in Europe before coming back to the States to coach. She didn't care about politics or personalities or who'd been there the longest. She cared about one thing: winning. I sent her my game footage from the championship match. Not the entire game, just the 15 minutes I'd played. 15 minutes that showed everything I could do when given the chance. She called me that evening, Marena Castillo, she said, her voice warm but businesslike. "I watched your tape. I'm impressed." "Thank you," I said. trying to keep my voice steady. I'm looking for a new opportunity. I also know what happened in that championship game. The way you were treated. She paused. I want to offer you a spot on the Storm. My heart stopped. Are you serious? Dead serious. We have a spot opening up for next season. It's yours if you want it. I didn't hesitate. I want it. Good, because I have a feeling you're going to fit in perfectly here. We appreciate players who've been underestimated. We have a tendency to turn that into fuel. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. By the end of it, I was officially a Seattle Storm player, and the Ravens had officially lost the best midfielder they'd ever had. The news broke 3 days later. The Portland sports media went crazy. Some called it a betrayal. Others called it brilliant. The Ravens front office released a statement saying they respected my decision and wished me well in my future endeavors. Coach Martinez called me directly. Marena, I think you're making a mistake, she said. The Storm are a different kind of organization. They're not a family like we are. Family. The word that's supposed to make everything better. Supposed to excuse every slight and justify every betrayal. The word that's used to make you feel guilty for prioritizing your own needs over the comfort of people who clearly don't prioritize you. You're right, I said. They're not a family. They're a professional organization that values talent over politics. And right now, that's exactly what I need. I hung up and blocked her number. The next few months were a whirlwind. Moving to Seattle, learning new systems, building relationships with teammates who didn't know my history or my baggage. It was terrifying and exhilarating and exactly what I needed. Coach Vasquez was everything I'd hoped she'd be. She pushed me harder than I'd been pushed in years, but she also believed in me in a way that felt foreign after 3 years of being taken for granted. She saw what I could do, what I had always been capable of, and she gave me the tools and the opportunity to do it. My new teammates were different too. They were older, more experienced, more focused on the game than on the drama. They welcomed me not because I was new, or because they felt sorry for me, but because I could help them win. It was refreshing and humbling and exactly what I needed to remember why I'd fallen in love with this game in the first place. The season started in March. By May, we were in first place in our division. By July, we were being talked about as championship contenders. And by August, we were preparing for the biggest game of the season. The division championship against the Riverside Ravens. The irony wasn't lost on me. After all these months, after all this growth and change and self-discovery, it was going to come down to me versus my former team. David versus Goliath. Except I wasn't sure who was who anymore. The game was scheduled for a Saturday in late August, back in Portland, in the same stadium where I'd been benched and humiliated less than a year before. The local media was calling it the revenge game. They were running stories about my departure, about the way I'd been treated, about whether I was good enough to compete at the professional level. I tried to ignore the noise, but it was impossible. Every interview, every article, every social media post was about me versus them, about whether I'd made the right choice, about what this game would prove. The truth was, I wasn't sure what it would prove either. I'd spent so many months focused on becoming a better player, on proving that I belonged with the Storm, that I'd almost forgotten about the Ravens, almost forgotten about the way they'd made me feel small and expendable and past my prime. But as the game approached, as the media attention intensified, as old wounds reopened and new ones formed, I remembered every slight, every dismissal, every moment when I'd been told I wasn't good enough. I remembered the way my former teammates had looked at me, the way they'd talked about me, the way they'd celebrated my departure, even as they pretended to wish me well. I remembered, and I decided that forgetting was overrated. The day of the game dawned clear and bright. One of those perfect Seattle summer's days when the air is crisp. And the possibilities feel endless. I'd been sleeping poorly for weeks. My dreams filled with scenarios that ranged from triumphant to catastrophic. But when I woke up that morning, I felt calm. Centered. Ready. The bus ride to Portland was quiet. My teammates knew what this game meant to me. Knew the story behind the story. They'd seen me work for this moment. Seen me push myself beyond what I thought was possible. They believed in me. And that belief had become the foundation of everything I'd built over the past year. When we arrived at the stadium, I was struck by how different it looked from the outside. It was the same building, the same structure, but it felt smaller somehow, less intimidating, like a place I'd outgrown rather than a place that had rejected me. The locker room was buzzing with nervous energy. Coach Vasquez went through the game plan one more time, highlighting key matchups and strategic priorities. When she got to my name, she paused. "Marena," she said, looking directly at me. "I want you to know that you're starting today not because of your history with this team, but because you've earned it. You're our best midfielder, and we need you to play like it." Best midfielder, the words that Cassie Werner had said to me almost a year ago. The words that had planted the seed of doubt that eventually grew into the courage to leave. Hearing them from Coach Vasquez in this moment felt like coming full circle. "I won't let you down." I said, "I know you won't," she replied. "Because you never have." The warm-up was surreal, running on the same field where I'd been benched, where I'd sat and watched my former teammates play the most important game of their season without me. But this time, I was wearing different colors. This time, I was the one they had to worry about. I could see the Ravens warming up on the other side of the field. Some of my former teammates waved at me. Friendly gestures that felt hollow after everything that had happened. Others avoided eye contact entirely, as if acknowledging me would somehow curse their chances. Coach Martinez was there, of course, pacing the sideline with the same nervous energy I remembered from my playing days. When our eyes met across the field, she nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement that said nothing and everything at the same time. The stands were packed. 500 people had become 2,000. Drawn by the storyline and the stakes and the simple human fascination with seeing someone try to prove their worth, I spotted the woman who had chanted my name during the championship game, still wearing her Ravens jersey, but holding a sign that read, "Welcome home, Marena." It was almost enough to make me cry. The game started fast and physical, both teams knowing that this was about more than just points in the standings. The Ravens came out aggressive, trying to establish dominance early. They were playing with the desperation of a team that had something to prove, something to defend. But we were ready for them. We'd studied their tape, learned their patterns, identified their weaknesses, and we had something they didn't: complete confidence in every player on our roster. The first goal came in the 23rd minute. A perfect through ball from our left wing found our striker in space. And she made no mistake with the finish. 1-0 to Seattle. And the crowd went quiet. I felt good on the field, comfortable in my skin and confident in my abilities. The Ravens were marking me closely, clearly aware of the threat I posed, but their attention was actually helping my teammates find space. It was a chess match, and I was finally playing with pieces that matched my opponents. The second goal came just before halftime. A corner kick that I helped set up with a perfectly timed run that drew two defenders away from the play. When the ball found the back of the net, I looked toward the Ravens bench and saw the exact expression I'd hoped to see. The dawning realization that they had made a terrible mistake. At halftime, we were up 2-0, and I could feel the momentum shifting. The Ravens were rattled, pressing too hard, making the kinds of mistakes that teams make when they're desperate. Coach Vasquez reminded us to stay patient, to trust our system, to let them make the errors that would seal their fate. The second half was a different game entirely. The Ravens came out with renewed intensity, throwing everything they had at us. They scored in the 58th minute. A brilliant individual effort that reminded everyone why they'd been champions just a year ago. But we weathered the storm. We absorbed their pressure, stayed compact and waited for our moment. In professional soccer, that moment always comes. If you're patient enough to wait for it. It came in the 82nd minute. I was playing deeper than usual, helping to break up a Ravens attack, when I intercepted a pass intended for their star striker. The ball sat up perfectly for me, and I could see the entire field spread out like a map I'd been studying my whole life. Our striker was making a run down the left side, but she was covered. Our right wing was open, but the angle was too tight. There was a gap in the middle, but it would require a perfect pass to exploit it. And then I saw it, the opening that no one else had noticed, the space that existed only for a split second before it would close forever. It was the kind of pass that required not just skill, but absolute confidence in your ability to execute under pressure. I hit it perfectly. The ball sailed over the heads of two defenders and landed exactly where I'd intended, right in the path of our attacking midfielder. She took one touch to control it, another to set herself, and then she buried it in the bottom corner. 3-1 to Seattle. Game over. The crowd exploded, but this time it wasn't for me, it was for us. For the team that had just claimed the division championship, for the players who had earned their moment of glory. But as I celebrated with my teammates, as I felt the pure joy of victory washing over me, I caught sight of the Ravens' bench. They were deflated, defeated, staring at the scoreboard with the kind of disbelief that comes from watching your season end in the cruelest possible way. Coach Martinez had her head in her hands. Several of my former teammates were crying. I should have felt satisfaction. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like I'd gotten my revenge in the sweetest possible way. Instead, I felt empty, not sad, exactly, not disappointed, just empty, like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. After the game, after the celebrations and the interviews and the trophy presentation, I found myself alone in the locker room. My teammates had gone out to celebrate, but I'd begged off, claiming exhaustion. The truth was, I needed a moment to process what had just happened. I'd proven everything I'd set out to prove. I'd shown that I wasn't too slow, too old, too past my prime. I'd demonstrated that the Ravens had made a mistake in underestimating me, that Coach Martinez had been wrong to bench me in the biggest game of the season. But sitting there in the quiet of the empty locker room, I realized that none of that mattered anymore. The revenge I thought I wanted, the vindication I'd craved, the satisfaction of proving my worth, it all felt hollow now that I'd achieved it. Because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped needing their approval. I'd stopped defining myself by their opinion of me. I'd found a team that valued me, a coach who believed in me, a place where I could be the player I'd always been capable of being. The Ravens hadn't just lost a game today. They'd lost the power to hurt me. My phone buzzed with a text message. I expected it to be from one of my teammates, checking to see if I was okay. Instead, it was from Cassie Werner, my former teammate who had shown me kindness when everyone else had written me off. "Congratulations," it read. "You were incredible. Today, I'm sorry it took us so long to see what everyone else could see." I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about how to respond. Part of me wanted to be gracious, to take the high road, to pretend that water under the bridge was just water under the bridge. But another part of me wanted to tell her the truth about what this year had taught me. In the end, I settled for something in between. "Thank you," I typed, "but I don't need your apology. I needed your support when it mattered, and I didn't get it. That's okay though. It taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I hit send and turned off my phone. Walking out of the stadium that night, I passed the same parking lot where I'd sat in my car a year ago, crying after being benched for the championship game. The same spot where I'd questioned everything I thought I knew about myself, where I'd wondered if maybe they were right about me being too slow, too old, too washed up. But I wasn't the same person who had sat in that car. I wasn't the same player who had accepted being benched without a fight. I wasn't the same woman who had defined herself by other people's opinions of her worth. I was Marena Castillo, starting midfielder for the Seattle Storm, division champions and the best version of myself I'd ever been. And that was worth more than any revenge I could have imagined. The best part about proving people wrong isn't the moment they realize their mistake. It's the moment you realize you don't need them to realize anything at all. As I drove back to Seattle that night, windows down and music playing, I thought about the woman who had chanted my name during that championship game a year ago. She believed in me when my own team didn't. She'd seen something in me that I'd forgotten was there. I made a mental note to send her a signed jersey, not because I owed her anything, but because some kindnesses deserved to be remembered and repaid. The next morning, I woke up to a world where I was no longer the player who had been benched, no longer the woman who had been deemed too slow, no longer the person who had been written off by the people who should have known better. I was just Marena Castillo, professional soccer player, division champion, and living proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming the person you were always meant to be. My phone had dozens of messages from reporters, from friends, from people I hadn't heard from in years. Everyone wanted to know how it felt to beat my former team, how it felt to prove them wrong, how it felt to get my revenge. But the truth was, I wasn't interested in talking about the Ravens anymore. I wasn't interested in relitigating the past, or proving points that no longer needed proving. I was interested in the future, in the championship we were going to chase, in the player I was still becoming. That afternoon, I drove to a local soccer field where kids were playing pickup games. I sat in the stands and watched them play with the pure joy that I'd almost forgotten was possible. No politics, no drama, no question of whether they were good enough or fast enough or young enough. Just kids playing the game they loved because they loved it. One of the girls reminded me of myself at that age. Not the fastest, not the strongest, but with a soccer IQ that made up for everything else. She was making passes that kids twice her age couldn't see, finding spaces that shouldn't have existed, playing the game like she was born to it. After the game, I walked over to her. "You're really good," I said. She looked up at me with the kind of pure confidence that only comes from not knowing you're supposed to doubt yourself. "I know," she said. "I'm going to play professionally someday." "I believe you," I said. "Just remember that it's not about being the fastest or the strongest. It's about being the smartest and the most determined." She nodded seriously, like I'd just shared the secret to the universe. Maybe I had. Driving home that day, I thought about all the people who had doubted me, all the voices that had told me I wasn't good enough, all the moments when I'd almost believed them. I thought about Coach Martinez, who had probably meant well, but had been wrong about what was best for the team. I thought about my former teammates, who had been complicit in my dismissal through their silence, if not their words. But mostly, I thought about the woman I'd become over the past year. The woman who had taken the worst moment of her athletic career and turned it into the catalyst for the best year of her life. The woman who had learned that sometimes you have to leave the people who claim to love you in order to find the people who actually do. The woman who had scored the winning goal not just against her former team, but against every voice that had ever told her she wasn't good enough. That night, I called my mom, who had watched the game on the live stream from her home in California. "I'm proud of you, Mia," she said. "Not because you won, but because you never gave up on yourself." "There were times when I wanted to," I admitted. Times when I thought maybe they were right about me. But you didn't, she said. You kept fighting. You kept believing. And look what happened. What happened was that I learned that the sweetest revenge isn't about making other people suffer. It's about refusing to let their limitations become your limitations. It's about proving to yourself that you're capable of more than they ever imagined. It's about discovering that the opinion that matters most is the one you have of yourself. 6 months later, I was named to the All-Star team. A year after that, we won the national championship. 2 years after that, I was offered a contract to play professionally in Europe. I never did go back to Portland to visit the Ravens. I never reached out to Coach Martinez or my former teammates to gloat or to forgive, or to do anything that would suggest I was still carrying their rejection around with me. Because I wasn't. I'd set it down in that locker room after the championship game, and I'd walked away from it completely. The last time I thought about the Ravens was when I saw an article about them in the sports section of the Seattle Times. They'd had a disappointing season, finishing 4th in their division. The article mentioned that they'd been rebuilding for the past few years, trying to recapture the magic that had once made them champions. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but mostly I felt nothing at all. They were just another team now, playing in a league I'd moved beyond, competing for prizes that no longer interested me. I'd found something better than revenge. I'd found a place where I belonged, people who valued me, and a version of myself that I'd never known existed. Sometimes the best response to being told you're not good enough is to go somewhere else and prove that you're better than good enough. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to convince people who have already made up their minds about you. Sometimes the sweetest victory is simply becoming the person you were always meant to be, regardless of who believed in you along the way. My name is Marena Castillo. I am 34 years old now, and I live in Seattle, Washington, where I play professional soccer for a team that sees my value and celebrates my contributions. I am a division champion, an all-star, and proof that it's never too late to rewrite the story people have written about you. And sometimes, when I'm feeling particularly generous, I think about that young girl on the soccer field, the one who knew she was good enough without needing anyone else to tell her so. I think about the confidence she had, the certainty she carried, the way she believed in herself without question or hesitation. That's the person I am now. That's the player I've become. That's the woman who scored the winning goal not just against her former team, but against every doubt that had ever lived in her own heart. And that, more than any revenge I could have imagined, is worth everything. The moral of this story isn't that you should switch teams or prove people wrong, or even that you should fight for what you believe in. The moral is simpler and more powerful than that. Sometimes the people who claim to know you best are the ones who understand you least. Sometimes the family that's supposed to lift you up becomes the weight that pulls you down. And sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is stop trying to prove your worth to people who have already decided you're worthless, and start proving it to yourself instead. Because at the end of the day, you're the only person whose opinion of you really matters. You're the only person who can decide whether you're good enough, fast enough, strong enough, young enough, or worthy enough. Everyone else is just noise. Have you ever been betrayed by the people closest to you? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that we're not alone in our struggles, that we're not the only ones who have been underestimated or dismissed, or told we're not good enough. Sometimes the most beautiful revenge is simply becoming the person you were always meant to be, and inspiring others to do the same. That's what revenge treats is all about. Not getting even, but getting better. Not proving them wrong, but proving yourself right. Not seeking validation from the people who rejected you, but finding it in the people who celebrate you. And most importantly, not letting anyone else's opinion of you become your opinion of yourself, because you are more than their limitations. You are more than their expectations. You are more than their fears about what you might become if you refuse to accept what they've decided you are. You are exactly who you are meant to be, and that is more than enough.